6 months into his tenure as Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney finds himself standing on shaky ground. The former banker entered office with promises of stability, strength, and a unique ability to stare down Donald Trump in the name of Canadian sovereignty. But today, Carney is navigating a storm that seems to be growing more violent with every passing week, and the cracks in his strategy are beginning to show. The Canadian economy is stagnant. Tariffs have struck at the very heart of Canadian industry: steel, aluminum, autos, the backbone of manufacturing towns that once thrived on cross-border trade. Families are nervous. Business leaders are impatient. And Carney, for all his reputation as a calm negotiator and economic wizard, has yet to deliver the breakthrough he once promised. Trump has not budged. The U.S. president continues to flex American economic muscle, weaponizing tariffs and threatening annexations. Canada, for decades, was America's closest ally and largest trading partner. Today, that relationship has been transformed into a game of power politics where Washington dictates the terms, and Ottawa scrambles to soften the blows. Carney campaigned as the man uniquely positioned to manage Trump. His background at the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada gave him global credibility. He was hailed as the technocrat who could outsmart the chaos. But half a year later, his minority government has already made major concessions, dropping retaliatory tariffs, scaling back patriotic rhetoric, and adopting a quieter, almost cautious tone with Washington. For critics, it looks like weakness. For supporters, it's survival. And while the U.S. hammers away, China has opened a second front. Beijing hit Canadian canola exports with tariffs after Ottawa imposed duties on Chinese electric vehicles. Once again, Canada is caught in a tug-of-war between superpowers, without the economic leverage to dictate terms. It's not a question of winning, but of losing less. This is Canada's dilemma, trapped between two giants, punished for defending its interests, mocked if it does not. And Carney, for all his intelligence, is left managing what one analyst called the land of bad options. At home, discontent is rising. Environmentalists, migrant advocates, and indigenous groups are furious that Carney has softened progressive promises. Climate activists accuse him of hypocrisy, a former UN climate envoy who now backs pipelines and LNG projects. Migrant advocates say he has failed to deliver on human rights reforms. Indigenous leaders accuse him of ignoring core promises of reconciliation. The protests are no longer fringe. Earlier this month, thousands took to the streets across multiple cities, demanding answers, demanding action, demanding leadership. And the Prime Minister who promised bold change suddenly looks like a man caught in the crossfire, balancing survival abroad with unrest at home. Yet despite the turbulence, Carney's numbers are surprisingly resilient. Nearly 6 in 10 Canadians still approve of his leadership. They see him not as weak, but as constrained, boxed in by Trump's tariffs, squeezed by Beijing's retaliation, and limited by a fragile minority government. Still, those numbers are slipping. Poll after poll shows Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives creeping up, ready to capitalize on every stumble, every moment of hesitation. The central question is this: how long can Canadians tolerate patience? How long before frustration turns into anger? Because make no mistake, the economy is wobbling. Growth is flat. Investment is stalling. Unemployment is ticking up. If things don't improve soon, even the goodwill Carney currently enjoys will evaporate fast. Carney insists Canada can thrive despite the rift with the U.S. He points to natural resources, energy potential, artificial intelligence expertise, all assets that could position Canada as a global leader beyond the American orbit. He argues that Canada has what the world wants. But saying it is one thing. Delivering it is another. Energy expansion is a gamble. Pushing pipelines and LNG may open new markets in Asia and Europe, but it inflames domestic opposition and undercuts his climate credibility. Betting on artificial intelligence and green innovation may be the future, but those investments take years, and Canadians are hurting now. The opposition knows this. Poilievre has framed Carney as all talk, a polished banker playing politics with people's livelihoods. He paints himself as the champion of affordability, the voice of the frustrated middle class, the alternative to a government tangled in global disputes it cannot win. That message is resonating with many Canadians. And then there's the Trump factor. Every Canadian Prime Minister in modern history has had to manage relations with Washington. But few have faced an American president so openly hostile, so willing to use tariffs as weapons, and so unpredictable in negotiations. Trump thrives on chaos. Carney thrives on order. The mismatch is glaring, and every Canadian feels the cost. Southwest, what does the road ahead look like? Expect more turbulence. Expect more pressure on Canada's export sectors. Expect more political fights at home as Carney struggles to keep his progressive wing on side while fending off conservative attacks. Expect more tests of patience from Canadians wondering when the promises of stability will finally turn into results. The reality is harsh. Canada no longer has the luxury of leaning on its southern neighbor for economic certainty. The U.S. has weaponized that dependency. China has exploited it. And Carney is left trying to chart a new course in an era where middle powers have fewer tools, less leverage, and fewer friends than ever before. The story of Carney's first 6 months is not one of failure, nor of success, but of survival. Yet survival is not enough forever. The longer this drags on, the more Canadians will demand bold moves, not cautious compromises. They want strength. They want clarity. They want a prime minister who does more than manage decline. And that is the challenge that will define Mark Carney. Can he transform survival into leadership? Can he turn bad options into real opportunities? Can he deliver a Canada that not only weathers the storm but thrives in spite of it? Carney's balancing act is not just about tariffs and trade tables. It's about the very identity of Canada on the world stage. For decades, Canadians prided themselves on being the calm, reasonable partner, the country that could talk to everyone, the middle power that punched above its weight. But now, that image is cracking. To Trump, Canada is no longer a friend but a target. To China, Canada is not a partner but a pawn. And to many Canadians, their government looks less like a bold player and more like a referee stuck in someone else's game. That is the painful reality Carney cannot escape. Canada is discovering just how small it looks when the giants around it roar. Domestically, the storm is no less intense. Inflation may have cooled slightly, but the cost of living crisis has not gone away. Housing remains out of reach for young Canadians. Groceries, gas, rent, all rising faster than wages. Families don't care about global trade chess matches, they care about their bills. And that is where Carney's polished language risks falling flat. His warnings of economic rupture and geopolitical realignment mean little to a parent who can't afford daycare or a student drowning in debt. This is where Pierre Poilievre has found his opening. Every time Carney talks about climate finance or international diplomacy, Poilievre pounds the drum of affordability. He simplifies. He cuts through the jargon. And in politics, simplicity beats sophistication almost every time. That's why Carney's slipping poll numbers should worry Liberals, because they show not anger but erosion. Slow, steady erosion that could turn into a landslide if he missteps. And yet, Carney still holds an advantage: credibility. For all his flaws, Canadians believe he understands the global system better than anyone else. They believe he has the brains to protect the country from collapse. But belief is fragile. Once it fades, it rarely returns. This is why the coming months are so dangerous. If Canada enters recession, if unemployment climbs further, if another major protest erupts on climate or Indigenous rights, then the story of Mark Carney will no longer be about promise but about failure. And once that narrative sticks, it's almost impossible to reverse. The irony is striking. Carney was elected as the man who could manage chaos, but chaos may be the very thing that consumes him. He promised Canadians a steady hand, but even the steadiest hand cannot stop a storm from rising. And so the real question is not whether Carney survives the next year, but whether Canada itself can redefine its role in a world where the rules have changed. Will it cling to old alliances that no longer protect it? Or will it find the courage to chart a path of independence, even if that means pain in the short term? For Carney, the clock is ticking. Every day of hesitation is another day where Poilievre sharpens his attacks, another day where protesters gather, another day where Trump or Beijing tighten the screws. Time is no longer on his side. Because in politics, survival is temporary. Leadership is permanent. And right now, Mark Carney has yet to prove which one he truly represents. One thing is certain, the next 6 months will decide far more than just his political legacy. They will decide whether Canada remains trapped between giants, or finally learns how to stand on its own feet.